Then you guys again. I just realised that there was one point that I didn't cover in the raw versus cooked meat video. So I did notice today some people making certain comments and all that. Now, a lot of that stuff was actually weighed. See, all the USDA stuff, whether it's cooked or uncooked, is weighed. So it's not actually a shrinkage of the actual meat or anything like that people have mentioned, or anything unusual. This is cooked and uncooked, and it's actually cut specifically, and then they actually look at feces. Some in the past have been like dyes and other things have been put in to actually pick up where the things are going, what's going into the middle part of the mostly of the small intestine, and what is actually end up in the colon, quantities and stuff like that. So it's a bit more nuanced what's happening. So they are measuring things properly in these experiments. They're not basically just taking raw, two pieces of raw meat, equally value, and then cooking one. Obviously it's going to change in weight and all that. No, these are cooked, weighed, specifically cut to the specific weight, and then analysed, and the same thing there. And pretty much they will sometimes have people that will actually fast and wash out, and there are studies that do that as well. There is a lot of this comes from a lot of pulling a lot of studies and averaging things out. So obviously between people there's going to be variability, and if you look at different data sets like from Europe and other places, you'll actually see some slight variability in that. They'll still be the same, that you get more protein from cooked. That means bioavailable, that gets absorbed. And I actually made that quite clear that it's by cooking you're actually breaking down the protein structures, and then it's easier for the stomach to break more of that down into amino acids. But obviously some of it actually ends up in the colon. The difference, what ends up in the colon, is the difference that between what is absorbed and what isn't absorbed, and pretty much ends up in the colon. So people will ask, well, they say, well, you're getting less protein, you're getting you're getting more protein in, fine. You're getting less fat, just slightly less. It's slightly different. You could potentially eat more cooked, meat or uncooked meat. Well, why are all these people, in particular ex-vegans, being in the majority, less people that come from a sad diet? It's more you'll find in people that come from a plant-based background. They'll claim that they are actually getting way better results on a specific, on a raw carnivore diet. And they'll basically say, the rest of you carny tarts out there are wrong. Raw meat is the way to go. You are wrong. We are right. And so you've got this competition. The people that actually cook meat, they'll say, well, hold on, you're getting more actual protein that's coming in. You're extracting, it's becoming more bioavailable, not protein, amino acids, because we don't use foreign proteins that create autoimmune problems. We absorb amino acids, not the proteins. If you can't break down the proteins sufficiently, you can't absorb them. You only absorb the amino acids. Those proteins end up in the colon and then in the toilet. Okay? That's how it actually works, the physiology. So it's really the problem, and this is where the argument comes. People will say, well, I'm getting more protein, so why shouldn't I be more healthier? You guys are ridiculous on the side of the raw versus and so it goes back and forth. Now I actually think that they have a good argument, but they don't know why. See, this is the problem when people are ignorant about why. They will jump up and down and make arguments, but without any solid evidence. And it's been around. Paul Mason actually showed it. He didn't explain it the way I'm going to explain it, but he actually showed it. So if you remember the fibre one, the fibre video that Paul Mason did, Dr. Paul Mason from Sydney, Australia. Well, that Aussie actually showed that, if you take out the fibre, so goes away the IBS. Now, what do people on a plant-based diet are going to have more? They're going to have IBS. They're going to have more gut problems compared to a sad dieter who's basically having refined sugars, which are absorbed in the small intestine, don't end up in the colon, like fibre aggravating the colon by excessive fibre. We don't have a cecum, we have an appendix. We don't have the capacity to ferment and break down fibre. So fibre, if you look under a microscope, you'll see these little hooks. Now, when you cook it, it does actually break some of that cellulose structure down, and it's slightly less problematic, but it's still problematic. It'll actually create little tears inside the actual colon. Too much is probably what is driving, this is my personal opinion, not medical advice, it's probably what's driving things like diverticulitis and a lot of other gut-related issues and derangements, because those collagen structures are being damaged. So, in order for those to heal, what do we need? What do we need, boys and girls? Short-chain fatty acids. That's what we need. We need short-chain fatty acids. We need butyrate. So what is the advantage of not digesting as well a lot of the protein? More of it's going to end up in the colon for the bacteria that are going to produce more short-chain fatty acid. And that short-chain fatty acid is going to be healing to the colon. So somebody coming from a plant-based background with far more enteric damage, the gut lining, is going to be somebody who will want to utilize the raw approach in order to get more of that stuff in the colon to provide nutrition for those bacteria to produce more short-chain fatty acid. On a carnivore diet, where you absorb most stuff, cooked in particular, through the small intestine, not much ends up there. As an example, unless you're talking eating dairy, which, yes, it does slightly, but that's for another day, and other reasons, another video. But that is the reason, the advantage of, for people like that, with IBS and all that, raw sort of eating. But the problem is we don't understand that. And so we've come up with spurious arguments, anecdotes. But the real reason is you're actually getting more in and actually facilitating more short-chain fatty acid from those, bacterial strains utilizing protein, and some of the fats that don't get absorbed. That's not much. It's usually the proteins but even some of the fats, if you don't cook them, they also end up, and they also provide some stuff. And I'll show you the study that actually Paul Mason showed, but he didn't show the entire study, he just showed elements of it to basically show that you can get short-chain fatty acids from animal foods. So let me just share the screen. So this is the actual study was diet rapidly and reproducibility alters the human gut microbiome. Okay. Yep, 230. Yeah, that's enough. So if we go right, I'm not going to read the study because that's not the purpose of this video. People can read it at their, that are interested. Further up, yeah, right here. You can actually see that the fibre, that's baseline and washout. So they actually did baseline, started people, and then gave them more fibre or fat or whatever. as you can see, plant-based, fibre, if you give people fibre, not going to have much of an effect with zero fibre, obviously. It's going to be down to zero. So that's an obvious thing. Look at fat. Many people poo-poo fat. Plant-based fat, shit. Animal-based fat, even higher than fibre. You see? Boys and girls, way higher. Remember, that's from 0 to 35, 0 to 80. Fibre, fat, absolutely annihilates all other sources. Animal fat, not plant-based fat. Your plant-based fat, forget it. Doesn't work the same. This is what we're saying. Animal fats are different than plant-based fats. We've been saying it over and over again. People don't listen. Here's the physiology, actually, the exact response in terms of the effects. Protein, again, animal protein is much higher than plant-based protein. So really, if you're on a plant-based diet like refined carbs and shit like that, you're going to get shit because you're going to be down here low. This is why a lot of sad dieters also have diverticulitis and all sorts of other problems, because they've got very low short-chain fatty acids because they can't generate them from the plant fats or the plant proteins. They can only do it from the fibre. And too much will do them damage. There you go. There's the problem. And there's a dose response. So A, diversity, it's not much difference between the two. B, diversity, far more diversity. Look at here. That's plant. That is, because that's the baseline, and then that's the washout. Look at that animal-based diet. Will actually create more diversity. We see it in the tribal people. It's not the fibre, it's the meat. So, these will tell you all the different species and all that. I'm not going to go through that. That's for another day, another video. This one was the one that actually over here that we looked at acetate butyrate, isovalerate, and isobutyrate, which is the different ones. And as you can see, acetate can actually turn into glucose. Okay? It's actually one of the pathways of generating sugar in the body. There's multiple ones. We think about gluconeogenesis. I'm going to blow your mind even on that subject matter. You have no idea about the physiology, how, all the different pathways and all that. Well, I think about 22 from memory. It's been a while. I have to go back and remind myself. So, plant, more of this one. Animal, less. Good. Butyrate, yep, but we get also in ketosis, we get also ketones, which are beta hydroxybutyrate. So it's very similar. So if you add that, it probably is higher even on that front. And here you have to have the fibre. If you're on a processed food diet, forget it. This isn't going to be happening. This is only due to fibre. And that causes damage to your enteric site, especially if it's raw. It will rip your gut apart year after year doing that to yourself. Isovalerate, absolutely very high. And isobutyrate, absolutely very high. So you can get more than enough. Now, these were done with people on cooked meat, okay? In these experiments, they never use raw meat because people just don't like it. So this is cooked meat. Now, can you imagine raw meat where you're actually absorbing less through the middle part of the small intestine in terms of amino acids, and you're dumping more, way more of that, that extra third, way and slightly more because it's actually slightly into the enterics into your colon. Well, what do you think is going to happen? Those short chain fatty acids are going to go through the roof compared to even the cooked meat, which is higher than many of the plants in overall terms. If you look at the numbers, so. And we don't need as much because we don't have an inflammatory diet that actually causes a lot of damage. Okay? That's the other advantage. We don't require, but this is the reason why people feel better. They've taken out all the fiber that's actually aggravating the colon, and then they're actually putting in more aminos and fats that haven't been digested sufficiently. They end up more of those inside your colon, providing you even with more short chain fatty acid to provide food to heal the enteric system, the colon. That is the mechanism. That is why it actually works. And that is why if you come from a plant-based environment, it's probably maybe a good idea to incorporate a bit of raw food into your, and it's probably really why a lot of different types of raw food, it's not only, ruminant meat, but fish and many others, you get more of the undigested proteins and fats that end up in the colon, providing that additional food for the bugs who create more short-chain fatty acids. That's where the benefit comes from. And once you've actually healed, you can really go back to cooked. But most of them, they get so used to it, and then they get ideologically crazy about it, that they don't realise, once you've actually healed, you don't need to do it anymore. But, because they don't understand the mechanism, how it's actually working, and so then they become fanatical about it. You can actually see, different things, bacteria and fungi, so how certain different cheeses interact as well. They have different effects. Different cheeses have different effects, even on the different bacterial strains. But you can actually see Lactobacillus lactis, look at here. These are baseline. So when you see BL, it means baseline when people come in and then they're given more plant-based food to see, like more fiber, to see what is actually happening, or more meat. Baseline, more meat. Look at that. Look at that. So these are actual beneficial bacteria. Look how much they go through the roof on. Got it? This virus seems to love the plant-based one. I won't say anything about that because it actually attacks, not us, but it does. I think that's the one that actually attacks some of the bacteria. So it may be reducing your diversity, vagoons. Not a good thing. So I think that was about it. Yeah, that's right. That was the bile salts, again, far better results from an animal-based diet, more meat, greater with plants, more plants, fiber and all that. You actually, cause, no wonder people are getting gallbladder issues and all sorts of things on plant-based diets and all that. They just really cause problems with their bile, So animal-based, you're going to get much better total bile acids, much better functioning of your gallbladder. So anyway, I think that was about it. We've got no more. That's it. So, boys and girls, this is why some like it raw. They're not deviants. They like it raw because it helps them. It helps their colon all the way down to the anus. Anyway, that's my raw humour for the day. So, look, I hope that was informative to sort of understand and why we need to overcome some of this nonsense, raw versus cooked. It's nonsense. If you're a healthy carnivore, and especially if you're doing bodybuilding, you want to maximize the amount of protein in, you've got to have it cooked, not raw. If you've come off a plant-based diet and you've actually got a really bad gut situation, do some raw. It's going to be really helpful and useful for you, you know, in recovery. So everything has its place. And even traditional societies always incorporated some level of raw animal foods because they knew it helped. It helped digestion. It helped the actual digestive tract. They didn't know why. It was an anecdote. We know now that it's pretty much producing more short chain fatty acids to feed those, you know, cells and help them heal. Now we know it because we've got the research. Back then, or most tribal people don't. It's all just based on anecdotes. What works, what doesn't. So now you know why raw can be useful under certain circumstances and why cooked has an advantage for the majority of consumption that we should do. Anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video. See yous.